Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today is going to be the start of the very first 2025 weekly reading vlog. Now, as I am filming this is actually the last couple of days of 2024. It is December 30th and I still have a couple of reading days left to fit some reads in before we move on to 2025 reading. So that is going to be the very loose structure of this reading vlog. So I have today and tomorrow of 2024. I have 2 days left to finish up some books I'm in the middle of, maybe pick up one or two last books to round out my reading year, and then moving on to a brand new reading year. So just like the space between Christmas and New Year's Eve feels very liminal spacey sometimes. So that's kind of gonna be like how this vlog is going to be as well. I think it's been a couple of months since I just did a weekly reading vlog and I didn't have a theme or anything, and I just set the intentions for the week to be just to read. So that is what we are going to do today and for the rest of the week. So today's plans, I'm 100 pages of the way through I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a book that I've been wanting to get to all year. I wanted to get to it in the summer, just never did, and I want to finish this one out before the end of 2024. It was one of my most anticipated, so I am going to try and get to the rest of this book 100 pages in, and I think it's about 350, so I am enjoying this so far. I do wish I would have picked it up in the summer because it does feel very summer slashery, but yeah, I have a good feeling about this one. I'm really enjoying it so far, and Stephen Graham Jones is one of my favorite horror authors. So even though I do wish I had picked this up in the summer instead of December, I am enjoying the fact that I'm kind of wrapping out the year with an enjoyable read. So that's really going to be kind of my goal for these next 2 days, is to get to books that I wanted to read this year and didn't. I am not trying to jinx myself or anything like that, but I have not like sat down and figured out my top 10 of the year yet. I never do that until it's actually January because I've had some surprises. Usually, at least for the past couple of years, I've found at least one book in December that's been one of my favorites of the year. So I never like ending a year until the year is actually ended. So, you know, who knows, this one could make it on my top 10 books of the year. I'm not too sure. So definitely going to be finishing out this book. I have a lot of reading time today. I still have some time off before I have to get back in the swing of work things again. So we'll definitely be finishing up the Stephen Graham Jones, and then I have a ton of physical library books checked out right now. So I will, I don't know, mood read, mood decide what I'm going to pick up next. Today, again, really laid back day. We are going to get a lot of the way through this book, and then also me and my partner are going to see Nosferatu. I'm so excited. I have been offline pretty much the past week or so because I was visiting family during Christmas when it came out, and none of them had really any inclination to go see it. So I have been avoiding spoilers like the plague, and we finally get to go see it tonight, and I am just so excited. I think I'll probably take a nap then today as well, is what that means, because we got a showing that starts at 10 p.m. So that's gonna be a late one, but I am so excited for that movie. So a very exciting horror-filled day ahead of me. So I'm going to go get to reading. I will check back in later, probably tomorrow, with another reading update. Happy New Year's Eve. Happy last day of 2024. I think that this is going to be the last book that I end up finishing this year. I'm about 90% of the way through this one, and I'm really having a blast. So I'm quite enjoying my time with this one. Again, I'm a little bummed I didn't read this one during July for Summerween, but I am having a fun time with this. I'll definitely be recommending it a lot this year, particularly for a summer horror read. I'm having a lot of fun with this one. We are following 17-year-old Tolly Driver, and he is just an average kid growing up in 1980s Texas. He's average, if not maybe a little bit geeky. But one fateful night, he and his best friend attend a high school party, and something horrific happens at that party that leads to the events that are foreshadowed in the title of this book, I Was a Teenage Slasher. So I will say, based on that synopsis, I had a feeling about where this book was going to go. And by page 50, you're at the party and you're realizing what is happening, and Stephen Graham Jones, his mind is just so incredible. I could not have expected this book to go where it goes. This is a deep dive, a love letter to the slasher genre, and the ways in which the slasher, the titular slasher, is explored in here, and just like what makes a person a slasher. I'm loving it. This takes place in July of 1989. This is a book that is clearly set in the 80s. It feels like it's set in the 80s. It does not feel like a book that is written for 80s nostalgia. It feels very true to the time and place, and I do believe, I'll have to read the acknowledgements at the end of this book, but I think this is a very personal book for Stephen Graham Jones, so I'm guessing that he was also 17 years old living in Texas in 1989, so it definitely feels true to the time. It is just such a love letter to a slasher, and this is a standalone. So I did read My Heart is a Chainsaw earlier this year. I actually read that in like July or August, and I had a lot of fun with it. I'm looking forward to continuing that series next year in 2025, but this one is really good. This actually comes out probably after my best books of 2024, so this could have made it into that video. I'm not sure yet, but 90% of the way through, I'm having a whole lot of fun with this one. And I also had a whole lot of fun at Nosferatu last night. I would highly, well, I don't know if it's still in theaters at this point, but this is a movie where I am glad I saw it in theaters. Me and my partner, we got each other the AMC A-list passes as a Christmas present to each other, just so we could go see more movies this year, and it was a movie that I'm really glad that I saw in theaters. It is so decadently gothic. It's such a gorgeous movie. It's a very long movie, but I never felt like at any point that I was like bored or checking my watch being like, okay, when is this going to wrap up? I have seen the 1970s Nosferatu, and I'm very familiar with Dracula. I haven't seen the 1920s Nosferatu, but this was so enjoyable. I loved it. The acting was incredible. The acting was incredible. Just the character work and just the way that this movie looked. Very beautiful, very technically beautiful, very horrific. From the very first scenes, even before the title gets thrown up on screen, there's a very visceral sense of unease that sits in your stomach and doesn't really let go until the ending of the movie. And even though I really liked it. I think this is a must watch for people who like vampires, and I love the way that this was done. This is definitely not, my camera just overheated and died on me, so I don't know where I was on my Nosferatu talk, but I just thought this was such a beautifully shot movie. Robert Eggers really knows how to shoot a beautiful movie. The Witch is it's in my top 4, in my Letterboxd top 4. I haven't seen The Lighthouse. I need to see The Lighthouse. That should be up soon. And even though The Northman, that is not my typical genre of movie. That is not like a story arc that I'm particularly interested in. And even though that one was one that was just middle of the road in terms of story for me, I loved the way it was shot. It was such a beautiful film, and I just really liked Nosferatu. And still, I also saw it very late last night. It started at like 10, so 10 we have the previews, and then we started and it was like 2.5 hours, so we got out of that movie late, and I'm still digesting how I feel about it, but it was very good. And the ending was so beautiful and sickening, and this is a horror movie that really got me, like, emotionally. My watch kept telling me, hey, breathe, calm down. Like, not even like I knew what was going to happen in this movie. I know Dracula, I know Nosferatu, and even though I knew that, just the acting and the way that we got 2 different places, and just the sheer terror and the anticipation beautiful, beautiful. I loved the scene where we're going up to Orlok's castle. That was absolutely beautiful, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous for our main character, and then also just the ending. Not to give a lot away, but the ending, there's a sunrise at the ending, and that's really, I think, the only time where we get a very bright picture that is a bright sunny day, and that and like the ending shot is just beautiful, horrific and beautiful, and I loved it, and I want to go see it again in theaters, and I think we probably will go see it again in theaters just so I can absorb other things that maybe I was focused on. It was a beautiful movie, okay? I really liked it. Vampire fans, if you haven't already gone to see it, go see it. I think if you don't like gothic horror, I would maybe wait for not a theatrical release because this is very gothic. The pacing is very gothic. If you don't have a lot of tolerance for that, and if that's not a subgenre that you don't love, totally fine. I wouldn't see it in theaters. I would wait to see it maybe on streaming where you can pause and watch it in chunks, because I still think it's a movie worth seeing. But I can respect, like, I'm a character-driven reader. Like the books that I like tend to be very chunky. I don't mind a long movie, a long character-driven movie, a long movie that takes a lot of time to develop imagery and just capture beautiful shots. So if you are not someone who likes gothic horror or vampires, honestly, this is not a movie, like, even though I loved it, I can recognize this is not a movie that's going to be universally loved. It's very dark. It's very dark. It's very horrific. It's very unsettling. I felt very unsettled the whole time driving home. I don't think me and my partner said much. Usually we sit in the car and we talk a lot about how we felt about the movie, but we were still in the unsettling atmosphere of the movie leaving the theater. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Maybe I'll go see it again and give more updates this week. I don't know, depending on what our schedule is going to be like. But today I'm not really sure what we're going to do. We were contemplating maybe going out for dinner, but we haven't made reservations anywhere, so that may not pan out. I also was thinking about book shopping potentially, because I have a gift card that I got for Christmas. So maybe book shopping, maybe going out to eat. If we're not going out to eat, we'll make something a little bit special, a little bit fun. We're homebodies. We're not going out to any big New Year's Eve parties or anything like that, but we're gonna have a fun night. So yeah, I'm going to go get to reading. I'll definitely finish up I Was a Teenage Slasher today, and then I don't know, have a fun, relaxed evening, and I will talk to you all next year. Hey vlog, happy Thursday, happy 2025. On Tuesday, New Year's Eve, me and my partner did end up going out to dinner. We went to a local sushi place, and that was really delicious. We came home, played a lot of Mario Party, and then, you know, got to bed pretty close after midnight, nothing too crazy. He still had to work yesterday, so the combination of that and New Year's Eve being in the middle of the week, we didn't really want to have any large plans or stay up super late, because again, he had work. I mean, I had work too, but I get to work from home. He actually had to go and commute and go to work. But yesterday he ended up working a little bit less than he usually did, and we just had a really good time parallel playing. He got Dragon Age Veilguard for Christmas, and then I was just reading. So yesterday was a very laid back, cozy day as well. So of course I did finish I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I actually finished this on the 31st. This was my very last book of 2024, and I really enjoyed it. It's definitely my favorite Stephen Graham Jones book, and I loved the acknowledgements, and I cannot wait for his book coming out this year. It's The Buffalo Hunter's Hunter, I believe is the title. It's about vampires. I'm so looking forward to it. So I finished this. It was a really great way to end out the year, and then I randomly picked up a novella because because I have a lot of stuff checked out from Libby at the moment, and it was the item that was closest to being returned. So yesterday I was like, let's just go ahead and pick this up. I had forgotten why I had checked it out or placed it on hold, and it was one of those that had such a long hold that by the time I checked it out, I couldn't exactly remember who had recommended it to me, why it was on my radar. But I ended up picking up and finishing A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck, and this one's about 100 pages, and I really enjoyed it. What a great start to my reading year in 2025. This is about a normal everyday man in life. He was a great father, great husband, just lived a very normal, unassuming life. He dies and he gets sent to hell, which is not what he was expecting. He was a Mormon. He was a very pious Mormon in life, and then he realizes that the afterlife is not like anything that he had believed in. And I know I'm saying hell, but the hell is not the typical like very Christian fire and brimstone hell, but he gets sent to a hell that is almost, or what he believes is potentially, an infinite library, and he has to figure out how to accomplish certain tasks to get him out of hell, because in the structure of the afterlife, most people do go to hell, but it's a temporary place where they learn lessons or do specific things before moving on to their heavenly, I suppose, reward. So in this hell, our main character is in this infinite library with thousands, like you cannot comprehend, the human brain cannot comprehend the number of floors, the number of bookshelves, the number of books, and he's searching for a very specific thing within the pages. This one is very existential, but I really liked it. This one, I almost feel like good comp titles for it, potentially Piranesi. If you liked that, you might like this one. It was very bleak, but it was also very beautiful. I had a really good time with it, and again, I finished it in a day. It's a very short one, and I think you'll want to finish it in a day just because it's so fascinating, and just the concepts and the things that our main character encounters. I really enjoyed it. So first book of 2025 done, and we're moving on to the second book. I had a little bit of difficulties figuring out what I wanted to read next today. Again, I've mentioned before, I have a ton of stuff checked out from the library right now. So I was combing through those and then what was available on Libby, and I ended up noticing that the next thing that is due at the library in terms of Libby holds is an audiobook that I also have the physical book for. So I think this is going to be my next read. This is Toward Eternity by Anton, and this is a sci-fi. I don't know much about it other than that, but I did not read a lot of sci-fi last year. The sci-fi that I read were more like combo, like science fiction horror. I don't think there were any like space odysseys or classic sci-fi or space operas. Like I don't think I read a lot, if any, sci-fi last year. So, you know, maybe let's start this year with something a little bit different. This book is also a shorter one. It's not something that I'm doing intentionally. I guess we're just starting the year out with some smaller books, but this one is a debut novel. It's set in a world where artificial intelligence and the quest for immortality have transformed the human condition. So I'm definitely intrigued. And when I was reading that blurb, I was like, this name sounds familiar. I didn't think that this was a debut. I went to the author information in the back of the book, and he has been a translator for a number of works, and I've read some of them. So that makes sense why there's a name familiarity there. I'm intrigued in checking out his debut. I'm gonna go get to reading, and I will check back in with a reading update tomorrow. Hey friends, happy Friday. I am 30% of the way through Toward Eternity, and I am enjoying this one. I actually really like the audiobook. The audiobook has multiple narrators because of the way this story is set up. It's a shorter one, and throughout this book we get different kind of vignettes of different characters. So far, we've not had a chapter be from the perspective of the same character twice, so I think that is going to be throughout this book. Every single chapter we are going to follow follow a different character, and that makes a lot of sense with the amount of time that this book is ultimately going to span. The blurb for this one says that it is thought-provoking, and that's absolutely true. This is a very short book. I almost want to say maybe it's novella length, but this has a lot going on inside it. There's a lot of different topics and questions and quandaries, moral questions and dilemmas to think about throughout these pages, and I'm having a really good time so far, and the prose in this one is really great. One of the big ideas that is introduced in this book is the fact that language creates personality as opposed to language being a tool of personality, and I think that's really interesting, and I think that commentary is pretty cool coming from someone who is a translator who probably does have, like, who thinks about language on a different level than most of us do at most times of the day. So the commentary about that, talking about language and how it is used in conjunction to humanity, and then also the discussions about Victorian poetry as a tool for colonization, that was really fascinating. I had never thought about that before, but reading like that in here was very eye-opening, and this one, it's a lot to try to describe too, because I think I read The Dust Jacket and a lot of what happens hasn't actually happened yet at page 80 or so. So I don't really want to give too much away. This is definitely a book that has made me think. I did not anticipate starting out 2025 with two very different existential books back to back, but here we are. This is really making me think. Like I mentioned before, we follow a bunch of different characters, but at the very beginning of this book, we are following a doctor, a researcher, and she has kind of cracked the code to curing cancer, and the cure for cancer is putting a lot of nanobites, not nanobites, nanites. So they eradicate cancer by replacing the body's cells with nanites. Those are android cells that cure those afflicted, but then they also make the person who has these nanites now effectively immortal. So they're curing cancer, but they're also changing the human body. So our main character is the chief scientist, like really spearheading this movement, and one day one of her patients just disappears. Completely disappears. It's like a locked room mystery. He goes into a room, there are cameras and everything. He disappears. He never comes out of the room. No one can find him. And then he, several days later, appears, but is it really him? There's something different going on with him that might have been influenced by the nanite technology that were replicating cells to keep him alive and cure his cancer. So that's the very start. That's what kicks off this story and the discussions of what it means to be human and what it means, like what memories mean and how important they are. This is a very interesting book. I knew going into this one, obviously it being a science fiction book, there was going to be a lot of science in here, a lot having to deal with technology, but what I wasn't expecting was the focus on also the arts and poetry and language and how all of those intersect. So this is definitely a very interesting read. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So continuing on reading this one, it's a shorter one, but just because of the depth and the big sciencey and like big picture ideas, I am going a little bit slower with this one, but I am enjoying my time so far tonight, me and my partner. I do have a little bit of time to read, but we're actually going to a board game cafe with some of our friends, so that'll be fun, but I won't have a lot of time to read. So that's my big plan for tonight. We're gonna do that, try something new. Neither of us have ever been to like a board game cafe before, so I know what the premise is. It sounds interesting. Hopefully we have a lot of fun, and I will talk to y'all later, probably later on this weekend, maybe Saturday afternoon or something, with another reading update. Okay, friends, happy Saturday. Last night was actually a whole lot of fun. We went to that board game cafe. I was talking about me, my partner, and some friends, and ended up playing a game called Wormspan, I believe. It's a playoff of the game Wingspan. I'd never played either of those before, but it was a very dragon-centric game, and it was very challenging. I'm not a tabletop game person. This is really my first excursion into playing one of those games, but it was a whole lot of fun. The art was really beautiful. Managed to capture some B-roll. I'm trying to get better about capturing B-roll while I'm out and about this year, but we did have a lot of fun. Came home and I ended up finishing Toward Eternity by Anton, and I really enjoyed this book. I don't know what else to say about it because I don't want to spoil the synopsis or exactly what we follow in this story, because again, it's really short. Also, I think this one is one of those books where it's concept forward rather than character or plot forward, if that makes sense. I feel like the time was dedicated to a concept or a message that Anton wanted to tell. The writing in this and the ideas put forward in this book are absolutely stunning. The characters really did feel at times, I mean, it's a very short amount of time with each character. Sometimes the characters did feel like they were just kind of vehicles to expand upon the themes of the story rather than individuals. However, it is very hard to have an intensely character-driven narrative, especially with this one, because it spans a long amount of time. So I did enjoy that. I enjoyed, there's a notebook that is the connecting thread between all of these stories. These stories last a very long span of time, and each chapter is from a different point of view of a character, but there is a notebook combining all of the stories together, tying them together. I would almost say the narrative kind of reminds me a little bit of Cloud Atlas in the way that we follow stories that you may not have expected them to all connect, but there's a little connecting thread between them. This one, the connections are more obvious than in Cloud Atlas, but this is also a shorter book and it's more intentional about the very direct connections between all of the characters. I just thought this was really good and really enjoyed it. I'll definitely be trying to read more science fiction this year. Also, Anton I actually have, not to spoil TBRs for in the future, but I do have a book that he's actually translated on my either January or February TBR. I don't know when you'll see the video, but I will be reading more from him. He's got a lot of translated work out. This is his first novel, and I don't know when or if he is going to write another one. This to me feels I feel like sometimes there's two categories of authors. There's authors that love to tell stories. They're typically the authors that produce a book each year or a book every year, and then there are authors maybe who don't write anything unless they have something specific to say, a specific message that they want to get out there, and this feels kind of like the latter. I would love to read more from Anton though. I'd also love to watch a TED Talk about some of the things that he discusses in here, the intersection between language and just humanity and science and what it means to be human. I enjoyed this one. This reading year is going great. I know I'm only about 4 days into it, but I still think it's going great. So moving on to the next book, we're going to kind of mix up the pace a little bit. I've read 2 shorter books this year, and for some other vlogs I have been reading horror, so I figured for this one we're gonna go with the fantasy. This is kind of a wild card, but I noticed last year I read a lot of pretty much only 2024 releases. I did dip into the backlist for different challenges like the 101 horror book series that I'm doing, but primarily I was reading new releases, and especially for fantasy, I wasn't really finding a lot of new fantasy books. So this year I'd love to find some new or old fantasy series. So I think my next book that I'm going to pick up for this vlog is going to be King's Dragon by Elliot. This is a fantasy that I don't know anything about. Honestly, I saw this at my library and the cover really drew me in. It's just such a gorgeous cover, and I think this came out in the early 2000s or 90s. Let's see, 1997 is when this book came out. So So the cover, absolutely stunning, and it says King's Dragons, so potentially it could be dragon centric. I don't know. I think I'm going to go into this not knowing anything at all. Now, Kate Elliot is an author. I have heard her name before. She's still publishing, I think still publishing fantasy. Servant's Mage, that sounds like a title I think that she's published. So I know if I pick this up and enjoy it, this is a very long series, and then she has a whole plethora of books to choose from. So this weekend, I definitely think that it feels like a good weekend to dive into a chunkier fantasy book. We are getting a cold watch tomorrow and going into Monday, so you know, it seems like a great stretch of time to stay inside and read. So let's go ahead and try out this backlist fantasy. I'm gonna go get to reading, and I will talk to y'all later with a reading update. Happy Monday. It is now time to wrap up this weekly reading vlog. Yesterday, I totally forgot, was the Golden Globes. It's actually me and my partner's newfound like guilty pleasure. We started doing it last year. It's just a really fun little ritual for us to put on awards shows, particularly like the red carpet footage before the award shows, and watch them. I don't know how it came about. Obviously, you can tell in this vlog and the rest of my videos, like I wear sweatshirts, graphic tees. I'm not a fashion forward person, and I think that's what makes it like such a fun guilty pleasure. Like we put on pajamas and make some cozy, comforting foods and just, you know, judge fashion, and then like watch the award shows afterwards and get some movie and TV recommendations as well. So I forgot that yesterday was the Golden Globes. So Sunday morning I did have some time to read, but then starting at around 5 p.m. in my time zone, we had that footage. So we did, you know, there were commercial breaks and all of that, and my partner will usually play like a very low stakes game. He was egg hunting in Pokemon yesterday, and then I was reading just a little bit here and there while we watched the Golden Globes. Standouts, probably, I thought it was so cool. Shout out to Demi Moore for winning for The Substance. I love seeing horror get appreciated. It is a genre that is so underappreciated in terms of pretty much any category in any award show. So I did think that was really cool. Also, Alien Romulus was nominated for like the blockbuster box office. I don't know, it was a new award, but I thought that was really cool as well. Alien Romulus was actually one of my favorite 2024 releases of last year. So I did think that was really cool. Horror never gets its flowers, and it's a genre that really has helped keep movie theaters in business. It is such a large genre. It just feels so strange that award show after award show, usually horror gets neglected because you have very artsy, very artistic and unique concepts coming out of the horror genre, but then you also have huge blockbuster franchises coming out of horror as well. So just to overlook all of it, it's really annoying at times. So it was cool to see some small nods towards the horror genre. I don't really love the categories it was nominated in, but I do think that's more of a problem of them just like kind of overlooking horror as a genre and then never really knowing where to put it when one manages to break through all of those hurdles. So that was pretty cool to see. I would definitely love to see more horror nominated in the future. In particular, 2024 was such an excellent year for horror movies, so I'd love to see more horror movies get their flowers at award show programs. But today, very laid back day. I have been reading a little bit more. I also got my Aardvark book club box in the mail, which I was so excited about. I did get 2 books this time. I'm trying to keep it to 1 book, but they did have their book of the year, and the reason why on January 1st I set my alarm for 6 a.m. in order to snag a copy of The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This was one of my favorite books of, I guess not last year anymore since it's 2025, but 2023. This was one of my favorite books and I absolutely loved it. This was their their book of the year, Aardvark's book of the year for 2024, and they released some special editions. So this copy, again, set my alarm for 6 a.m. because the dust jacket, underneath the dust jacket, we have a beautiful naked hardcover of the Reformatory. And then we not only have that, but we also have an author signature. So that was really cool. This is, again, a book I loved, and I had never gotten a physical copy. I read it via my library, so this was a really cool opportunity to put a great 5-star book on my shelves. Absolutely love this one, so I'm glad that I have it in my collection now and signed as well, which is really cool. And then my January pick for the monthly selections was Moth Eater by Linda H. Kodega. Dust Jacket says it's a startling and nuanced queer fantasy set amid the beauty of the Appalachian Mountains. The last witch of the ridge and a newcomer investigating the coal industry must choose sides in a clash between nature and development that's been over 100 years coming. And the dust jacket for this one, the cover is absolutely beautiful, giving very much Southern Appalachian Gothic. I'm really excited to pick this one up. This is my second Aardvark book box, and my goal for 2025, I'm really going to hold myself accountable to this one, is to not just get the books and then just have them sit and collect dust on my TBR, but actually read them in a timely manner. So I'm hoping to read this one, if not in January, because my reading plans are a little stacked at this point in the month, but either in February or March is my goal for this one. So that was my little book haul moment. And then to wrap up the vlog, let's talk King's Dragon. I'm about 100 pages into this one, and I am very intrigued. There's definitely a lot going on in this one. I feel like for especially a lot of very high and epic fantasy, if you don't know anything about the series and you open up the dust jacket and start reading the synopsis, there's a lot, right? Because you don't have any context of what the world looks like, what these terms mean, what the different characters and all of that. So there's a lot going on in the dust jacket synopsis, but at the part that I'm at now, we have met our two main characters. Our first main character is Ellen, and that is a very different pronunciation than I'm used to. The name I've actually seen before in the Dark Tower series, and the audiobook narrator pronounces it Elaine, and it's spelled A-L-A-I-N, but the audiobook narrator for this series pronounces it as almost like Alan, but there's a little bit of an accent to it, so Ellen. And that's our first main character. At the very beginning of this book, he is destined for a monastery to become a brother and to take his vows and have a life of piety. That is not what he wants. He's really bristling against being stuck in this position forever. It's not where his heart lies. It's not where his dreams and desires lie. He wants to travel the world like his merchant father, but he feels like he is stuck in that circumstance. And then we are also following our other main character, Leith, and she is also at a little bit of a crossroads. She has been traveling with her father for years, trying to evade something sinister that is following them. At the beginning of this book, both main characters have a very unfortunate event happen that sets their lives on new trajectories, and I'm really intrigued to see like where this is going. The world building is very interesting. This is very medieval Europe inspired, but in a way where you can tell that Kate Elliot has spent a lot of time researching. In a lot of ways it feels like historical fiction, with the way that the world is so like nuanced, and it just feels very, very real from the get-go. We have a very interesting magic system that's kind of hinted at. We haven't explored it a lot, but we also have a really well thought out religious system and religion that definitely influences the politics and the people in power in this world. So that's really interesting. It is a slower build up. We're getting a lot of world building and also character building as we're being introduced to these two main characters and their roles in what's to happen. I believe what I can anticipate for the rest of this book. Haven't gotten there yet. It's about 600 or so pages. At the onset of this book, it seems to be a very peaceful time for the kingdom in which these two main characters live. However, there are rumblings of threats from both external forces outside the kingdom and then rumblings and rumors of a civil war happening inside based on the king and then also his sister. So I'm really intrigued to to see where this one is going to go. I really like the old school fantasy aspects of it. It feels very classic fantasy. It's been a while since I've picked up an older fantasy series, and I'm really enjoying my time with this one so far, so I'll definitely be continuing on with this one into the week ahead. But that is going to be it for this week's reading vlog. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe to my channel. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!